Good morning to everybody, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Olivier Richard. I'm in charge of climate change at the French mission to the United Nations in New York. So good morning for the ones in New York and good afternoon for the ones in Europe. So I'm very glad to host this event about the Ocean Approved label today. As you know, the oceans and poles have sounded the alarm about climate change and are in danger today. I mean, oceans are covering 75% of the surface of Earth, but they're often very, very forgotten in our discussions about climate change and biodiversity. As you know, oceans regulate the major environmental balances, they provide resources, they link countries and people all over the world. They are important trade routes, but they are under threat today from climate change, pollution, and overexploitation of marine resources. And this is for this reason that the French President, Emmanuel Macron, has decided to organize a One Ocean Summit to scale up the ambitions of the international community on maritime and polar issues and put into action our responsibility towards the oceans. With the support of the United Nations and the World Bank, government, international institutions, businesses, and civil society organizations will meet in Brest on the 11th of February 2022. Several subjects will be on the agenda of this One Ocean Summit: governance of the oceans and the high seas, preservation of ecosystem and biodiversity, exploration and scientific knowledge of marine resources, but also sustainable blue economy, support for blue finance, and the fight against all forms of pollutions, including plastic. This international mobilization will build on all the One Planet events organized since 2017 and will give strong political momentum to speed up multilateral work on the ocean. Together, the very complementary One Ocean Summit to be held in Brest, but also the Our Oceans Conference organized by Palau on 16 and 17 February in Koror will help build determination in close collaboration with the United Nations ahead of several important international meetings in the first semester of 2022, like the Ocean Summit in Lisbon in June 2022. And I guess that ocean will also be a very important part of the agenda of the Indonesian presidency of the G20. So that's the reason why we have this event this morning or this afternoon, organized in partnership with the Fondation de la Mer and with the support of UN Global Compact, to present you some new tools to achieve, the SDG number 14 for the oceans. So we will present you today those tools and explain you how you could join these initiatives, how they could help to reach, this SDG number 14, and how they could feed into all those events on the oceans next year. So not to have any delay, I will give the floor now to Mrs. Sabine Roux de Bézieux, President of the Fondation de la Mer, and Mr. Philippe Guy, who is in charge of international development about the Ocean Framework and the Ocean Approved label. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Olivier, and thank you for the permanent representation of France at the United Nations in New York. Welcome to everyone. I'm asking the, yes, the slide is on at the moment. So we are very honored, Fondation de la Mer, to be presenting to you today the tools that we have developed with a number of large corporations and the French Ministry for the Sea. The Fondation de la Mer, next slide please, is a unique organization that was set up in 2015 by the maritime sector. It gathers scientists, NGOs, the maritime industry, sailors, basically everyone who is interested in protecting and developing the ocean in a wise manner. We have three main objectives. The first one is collective action, mobilizing everyone, and in particular, economic stakeholders to act upon the ocean and maintain its health for the long time and for future generations. Our second dimension or types of action covers the general public and in particular the young generations. And we have developed a number of educational toolkits and programs that are disseminated through school programs and through the Ministry of National Education in our country and also in a number of French-speaking countries around the world. Thirdly, we act directly upon marine ecosystems via specific programs, fighting against marine litter and protecting coral reefs, mangroves, and seagrass. Together, we need to act. Why is that so? As it was said before, the ocean covers over 70% of our planet. 90% of the world biodiversity is actually in the ocean. Next slide, please. It is also the key regulator for the climate as it absorbs between 25 and 30% of the CO2 and 90% of the excess heat generated by human activities. It also produces 50% of the oxygen that we breathe. 1 breath out of 2 is thanks to the ocean. We all know the ocean is in bad state at the moment. Though it is huge and beyond our imagination, the ecosystem that it represents is fragile. Some of their ecosystems are very damaged. Coral reefs and mangroves are disappearing and dying all over the planet. However, it's not too late. We can act today. We can act together for the future of our planet and of humanity. In that effect, the United Nations have developed a global tool called the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs that you all know of. Next slide, please. The 17 SDGs are interconnected to each other. Obviously, SDG 14, life below water, is the least known. Unfortunately, I should say, is the least known. However, it covers and it's intricately linked to a number of the other SDGs. Actually, as the slide shows you, SDG 14 has a direct impact on every single other SDG. Not only SDG 14, but every single target of the SDGs from 14.1 to 14.7, as this slide shows. It sounds obvious that SDG 14 is linked to SDG 13, the climate, and to SDG 15, biodiversity on land. But SDG 14 also impacts water on Earth, it impacts hunger, it impacts work, it's linked to consuming products and producing products. I'm not going to get into all these details, but without the ocean, the Earth would not be inhabitable. And together we have to look after this Earth that we really need. The reason why at Fondation de la Mer we have developed a number of tools for corporations is that we have realized that SDG 14 is the least reported on by companies. Next slide, please. If you look at top 1,000 companies around the world, listed companies, you can see that SDGs have become a grammar for companies reporting. However, SDG 14 is the least reported. It's the red sign on the slide. And that's the reason why at Fondation de la Mer, we have decided to help companies identify their impacts on the ocean, measure them, and act upon them. And I'll let Philippe Guy present these tools to you.
Thank you, Sabine. If you can go, Corentin, to the next slide, please. Yeah, so Fondation La Mer has early on decided to really be of service to companies, embrace companies, make sure that they get mobilized, and in particular respond to essentially what was coming back from the companies that she alluded to in the past, which were of difficulty in reporting on the oceans. One of the reasons is maybe there are probably multiple reasons, but at least two. One is that they're not necessarily aware of the impact of their activities on the oceans. And the second one is that they don't know how to appreciate what is their impact or quantify or measure it. And that's why the Fondation La Mer has developed these tools, which culminate in the Ocean Approved label, which I will detail in a few minutes. But basically, this is to answer there and offer to companies and financial companies. It's not only companies directly, it's also financial companies, the ability to measure their impact on the oceans. Next slide, please. So this product suite has essentially two components, an ocean framework, which is a baselining tool. I will detail that in the next slide. And essentially a process that takes this baselining tool, the ocean framework that you can see on the bottom left of the slide that you're looking at, which was, by the way, developed by a lot of scientific organizations in France, supported by the Ministry of the Seas in France, but also a bunch of private companies that have global reach like Total, Michelin, and many others, and supported also by the Boston Consulting Group. And the idea is to have something that is a quantified baseline, and I insist on the word quantified, because obviously there's lots of qualitative elements that are available to companies, but the notion of quantified is fairly unique and extremely important in our view in the ability to support companies in their ability to measure. It is followed by an audit conducted by an independent provider. In this particular case, it has been set up with Bureau Veritas to start with. And the whole notion is to start going from a picture, which is what's a baseline, to a film, what's the direction, in particular around defining an action plan and determining resources that are being put together to change the trajectory. And that culminates potentially with the label, the Ocean Approved label that Sabine talked about, that is about commitment over time. It can be of different levels, commitment of resources being one, commitment of resources and results being another one. That's the different levels of the Ocean Approved. But let me come back to if we can go to the next slide, to the baselining element, which is very important. Corentin, next slide, please. Thank you. So that's the ocean framework. Sorry for the complexity of the slide, but in fact, it's fairly simple. It takes the SDG 14 and breaks it down in all its components as defined by the United Nations, and essentially breaks that down into three buckets. What companies contribute to the oceans, pollution, acidification, changes to the maritime environment. What companies take out of the oceans, that's the exploitation of marine and coastal resources, and then some transversal topics, which is trying to measure and assess how much the oceans are an integral part of the strategy and the operations of the company. So you can see that it is fairly granular, goes from big buckets to smaller ones, the kind of impacts, to categories, to levers and indicators. The framework was designed to be extremely pragmatic. So it draws on sources that are very well known from multiple organizations, from GRI, from the FAO, from UNEP, from science-based targets. All of these are indicators that are very often very well known by companies, but it's packaged in a way that is really very, very concrete. So if I take an example, you have chemical pollution as a second green box on your slide. You have wastewater, which is a category within that. And then you have a series of levers that have been identified, like the diminution of the tonnage and concentration of chemical components. And then you have an indicator that is a very specific measurement of two types of chemicals that are being really well known by companies. So it allows to go from big to small, from broad buckets to quantified metrics. It also means that it is applicable to all industries. Sabine insisted on the fact that the Fondation de la Mer has been founded by members of the maritime industry. But this ocean framework and the ocean label are designed for all the sectors, not only the maritime sector. That's extremely important for us. And that's why it has been adopted by a lot of companies. Moving forward. Thank you. So the ocean framework, was an initiative led by the Fondation La Mer. It is getting traction, is getting recognition. The first and very important one was the one that came from the United Nations itself in June 21. where the Ocean Framework was recognized as a major tool for the achievement of SDG 14. I'll let you read what the comments are, but I mean, it's essentially the world's first tool which translates SDG targets and indicators and actions for companies. So this is really, the intent is to be very pragmatic and helping companies measure what they do. Next slide. It is also unique. So it is recognized and it's also unique. So since BCG was involved in helping set up the initial Ocean Framework in 2020, we've asked them recently, actually last month, to make a benchmark to make sure that this was still relevant. And they've compared different frameworks, different institutions that provide notation, scoring, etc., on water, on oceans, and overall framework. And we asked them to say, what's the breadth of coverage? How do we, what do we cover? Is it relevant across multiple industry? What's the depth? Is it specific enough in a way that allows companies to move forward? And frankly, and finally, is it something that you can be a certification, that you can communicate on targets that is specific enough? And as you can see, I don't want to go through all the details, but basically it seems, according to the benchmark that was done on a global base, that the Ocean Approved label and framework is still very unique. There is very comparable set of things that exist and are very, very good, but they are specific. If I look at the ocean labels, you have one only on fishing activities, which is very detailed, another one on shipping activities, which is very detailed. But overall, the Ocean Framework and Ocean Approved label are still very unique, and that's what makes them very valuable and recognized by companies. Next slide. So you have a few companies here. I want to insist on a couple of comments they made. Mr. Camus from Suez will talk about his own experience. I just want to highlight a couple of things here. Engie, which is a major global company, says, it actually allowed us to see that we have a role to play in SDG 14, which is something that they didn't think they had a role to play when they started the process. Talgo, which is a cosmetics company, is using it to qualify and modify the approaches of its suppliers. It's a cosmetic company based on extracting elements from the seas. And the scope of their activity can be modified, but if they don't touch what their suppliers do, it doesn't work. And CMS CGM, which is a major transport enterprise globally, looks at it and says, despite the fact that we know the oceans very, very well, it has been proving very, very valuable for us to use these metrics and also start talking downstream to our activities, in particular to the harbor managers. So fairly recognized by the UN, extremely unique in terms of benchmark, very useful as perceived by companies. If we go to the next slide. So, just stopping here, what companies get from there, for companies themselves, it's a materiality metrics. Not all companies are touched by all the different metrics that are in place. So companies can assess which ones are the most relevant for them. The label forces a lower impact trajectory, which I think is exactly what we are aiming for. At the end of the day, measurement without action makes no sense. They can communicate in a concrete manner on SDG 14, also engage their employees. Asset managers have embraced this actually very well, in particular as a baseline, as a way to baseline the ocean footprint before financing improvement programs. Broad asset managers are using it, some that are much more focused, but it is extremely important to embrace and impact and be used by financial institutions. Otherwise, companies will be at a different perspective from their financiers. Next slide. So where are we now? I mean, the Ocean Framework was launched in 2020. The label was launched in June 21, so it's fairly recent. However, it is attracting a lot of attention. As we said before, it's attracting attention from companies. It attracted attention from the UN itself through the approval of the work that was done in June. The intent of the Fondation de la Mer, and this is why we are assembled today, is to go big and to be global. The intent is to have this available worldwide so that as many companies as possible can benefit from it and can change their trajectory in terms of impact on the oceans. We are in conversations with different institutions. This is a few examples here. Magali Outers will talk to us about SCP Iraq in a few minutes, but essentially, a lot of foundations find that they are attracting funds to do good work. They do very good work in their country, in Finland, in Italy, in Portugal as examples. They have nothing to offer in return to companies. And the ocean framework is a tool for them to contribute to their corporate partners. And we find quite a lot of interest in there. At this stage, we are moving forward in trying to make that concrete, but the intent is to go much more global and certainly way beyond Europe. Next slide. So for the 92 participants today, I'm just looking at the bottom of my screen, wherever you are, the whole point is that, this is essentially an element that allows countries and then companies themselves to really find a way to pledge a change of trajectory on the oceans. At the end of the day, if companies do not measure their impact, they can't change their practices. And that's what we're offering here. So, Ignace was, before we started the conversation, was talking about the COP26 on climate. I'm sure we will talk about it in a few minutes. But since many years, companies and countries have been measuring their CO2 emissions. At the end of the day, we're trying to do the same, which is have a baseline of what companies do concretely, quantitatively, in terms of impact on the oceans, and have a way to modify their trajectory. At the country level, it may involve governments. In France, Fondation avec support the Ministry of the Seas, NGOs, business roundtables, foundations, and the dialogue is open for everybody. Just want to conclude on the last slide. If you want more information, this is not an advertising. This is simply an email address. You can contact us or go straight to www.oceanapproved.org and have more information. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sabine Roux de Bézieux and Philippe Guy, for this very clear presentation. And let me now give the floor to Mr. Ignace Béguin, Senior Manager, Ocean and Climate at the United Nations Global Compact on the initiatives of the UN Global Compact for the Ocean.
Thank you, Olivier, and hello, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here today to speak with, beside of the Fondation La Mer and many others on how companies can step up their action when it comes to the ocean. At the UN Global Compact, so it's an initiative launched by the Secretary General Kofi Annan in 2000 to really mobilize companies on the agenda of the UN, and now we have a mandate to work specifically on the SDGs. There is almost 13,000 companies that have a member globally of the UN Global Compact, and we have 72 local networks that engage with SMEs on the ground on a daily basis. So in 2018, the Global Compact, we launched the Ocean Stewardship Coalition. The ambition of this coalition is to look at how we can make a better use of the ocean to deliver on the SDGs. As Sabine and Philippe mentioned, the ocean has really the potential to deliver across the 17 goals. And here are a few examples. If we're able to really scale up the blue economy globally, it will help elevate people out of poverty, and especially in the coastal zone where we know that where the most vulnerable population usually are. It's also an opportunity to get people out of hunger if we are able to scale up sustainable fisheries and aquaculture. It's a way to provide a low carbon source of protein. Same thing for offshore wind and energy, etc., etc. So what we've done is to convene a group of government businesses. Now we have more than 300 businesses globally engaged, NGOs, academia, and scientific institution, as well as the UN, to offer a global platform for cross-sectoral collaboration to agree on frameworks and targets for the world to better use the ocean, how we better manage the ocean, and what should be the action that needs to be taken. And that's the objective is, to, of course, on the SDGs, but also on the Paris Agreement. Before going further, I just want to highlight the success of COP26 in terms of putting the ocean at the center of the agenda of the climate challenge. There have been the recognition that the ocean is now a full piece of the solution for the climate targets. First of all, governments agreed to hold the formal annual ocean climate dialogue under the UNFCCC. So to think how government can accelerate ocean-based climate solutions. And the private sectors are really accelerating action in, offshore wind, sustainable aquaculture, and so on, to position the ocean and hold the solution it's old to deliver on a net zero target. So there is really a strong momentum that has been created at COP26, and much more will happen in the years and the months to come, especially in the way to the UN Ocean Conference and COP27, which will take place in Egypt and Sharm el-Sheikh, where we have to really strengthen our work around resilience and adaptation. And we believe that ocean here again have a really role to play, both in terms of bringing, accelerating the sustainable blue economy to help have sustainable growth in developing countries, but also nature-based solution, for instance, for coastal cities. We are really at stress of sea level rise. Just to go back on the work of the UN Global Compact on ocean. What we have done in 2018 is to work on the sustainable ocean principles to provide a baseline for companies on what it is to do a good ocean business. And these principles are looking across the environmental, social, and governance issue, as well as transparency and reporting. It's really a broad perspective on what good ocean business means. And I think this is very complementary to the work of the Fondation La Mer and the Ocean Approved, who provide these deep dive metrics on environment, environmental impact on the ocean, and the Sustainable Ocean Principles provide this broader guidance for companies and also the investment institution and financial institution, to evaluate what good blue investment is, and also help guide them compared to the green and the blue. So that's the baseline, and the objective is to really accelerate in 5 key areas of action at the Global Compact. Is first of all zero carbon shipping, and we know how important is shipping in a really connected world, and if we are able to decarbonize this industry, it can really help to accelerate sustainable growth globally. Offshore renewable energy, of course, with a strong focus on offshore wind and the need to better manage the ocean, and marine spatial planning is at the core of our work. Sustainable blue food, providing guidance to accelerate aquaculture and sustainable aquaculture, and also better management of fisheries and fish stocks. In particular, area of work is mapping the ocean, where we specifically look at how ocean business can contribute to better know our ocean. And here we are working in close collaboration with the Decade of Ocean Science. And finally, pollution and how we can limit and stop plastic in particular entering the ocean. So that's an overview of the work we are doing. We have issued a series of global reference for the ocean, providing guidance and setting the narrative and the target for the industry. So please I'll have a look at those. I will not go in detail in all of this work today. Just to conclude and highlight, we developed in support of the Sustainable Ocean Principles a set of practical guidances which aim at operationalizing the principles for specific sectors. So it's a very concrete guidance on what the 9 principles means in terms of for the shipyard industry, for the shipping industry, ocean renewable industry, oil and gas industry, etc. We are covering 7 sectors. So it's really a sector-based guidance, which I encourage you to look at, either if you work in the industry or if you are a finance institution looking at what good ocean business means in terms of ocean renewable energy, what are the baseline criteria. These are really helpful guidance. There are more than 100 companies who have signed up to the principles, which represent 1.4 trillion assets in total. So that's a pretty massive impact, and the number are growing as we go also toward the UN Ocean Conference. So just to conclude, I would like to thank Fondation La Mer and France for the invitation today. I really believe that this type of meeting, and in particular the One Ocean Summit, are key critical moment to build momentum, action, and commitment for the ocean in the preparation of the UN Ocean Conference. It's the time to show to government that the industry is ready, that tools are available, that the finance sector is shifting its investment. So governments have the confidence to be more ambitious in setting targets and actions for the ocean in June 2022 in Portugal. So thanks to France and to Fondation La Mer for all the work in that regard. Thank you very much, and I look forward to further discussion and question if you have any.
Thank you very much, Ignace. Now let me give the floor to Mrs. Magali Outers, who represents the Regional Activity Center for Sustainable Consumption and Production, and she will explain us how the ocean approved label is developed in Southern Mediterranean Sea. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I would like to also thank you, Fondation de la Mer, for the invitation to talk about the recent agreement that we signed with the Foundation. So we are a center that is working for the UNEP Mediterranean Action Plan / Barcelona Convention. So it is one of the UNEP Mediterranean Sea Convention. So we work to protect the Mediterranean marine environment and coastal region. So the Mediterranean region is a region that is, well, a very, very important biodiversity hotspot, but also heavily affected by climate change. And it's a region that is, well, depending on the health of its sea, where we have a lot of maritime traffic, and also a region that depends a lot on the tourism. So our center is focusing on, within this convention, has a mandate to work on sustainable consumption and production and circular economy. And since 2014, we initiated a program to support sustainable entrepreneurship in the region. So we initiated some years ago, but it was at the time very pioneer. Now there are more initiatives and it's growing. So far we supported 3,000 entrepreneurs to develop their business plan. We have now a consolidated network of mentors in the region, so mainly in the southern Mediterranean countries. And we have also a network of business support organizations, so 100 business support organizations that are members of what we called our switcher support program. So switcher for to reference the people that make the switch to sustainable development, circular economy. Now we are initiating a program to focus especially on blue economy sectors. So to train and support the development of businesses within those sectors in the Southern Med, because blue economy sectors, well, blue economy is a priority for the region. And we were introduced to Fondation de la Mer by the French Ministry of Ecological Transition last year. And we learned about the label, and we found it very, very interesting. And this idea of connecting SDG 14 with businesses was very seducing. So we decided to partner, and now we will support the internationalization of the label in the Mediterranean countries. We are just starting now. So what we will do now is to select existing companies within our community that has more than 400 change makers that are already part and businesses. So mainly we will select companies most probably from the blue food sector, cosmetics, or a company supporting a solution to prevent and to tackle the issue of mallitter. Even if we know that the label is not applicable to all the sectors, at the beginning we want to start with companies that have more relation with the Mediterranean Sea. So we will, through the support of Fondation AMERS, they will, through their experts, to support those companies through the ocean framework, and then to get the label. And in a second step, we will, within all the training program that we have, that we will develop on blue economy, we will invite also experts from Fondation de la Mer to train our network of mentors within the region, so that also, I mean, we could have companies that are existing, that are integrating the label, but also see the possibility since the business creation to integrate this label, because we see that it's also a very interesting opportunity. So yeah, this seems to be a very promising journey, and this kind of label, I mean, yeah, I think can be very, very interesting for the Mediterranean region. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Magali Houters, for sharing your experience with us. And let me give the floor now to Mr. Bertrand Camus, CEO of Suez.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon. Very happy to be with you today, and as we are a very strong supporter of the label. Maybe to rewind a little bit, I think Suez has been very much committed to ocean protection for quite a while, because our activities have definitely a clear impact on ocean pollution. As you know, we are a global leader in waste and water management, so you all know the data about the fact that most of the pollution in the ocean is coming from human activities on Earth. I mean, if we go on as we have been doing over the past decades, soon 2050, you will have more plastic in the oceans than livestock. And therefore, we have been very much committed to act to try to mitigate as much as possible this pollution. The second point is that the more we move forward, we see that there are more and more aspects to be taken into account, not only pollution, but for example, biodiversity. And this is something, for example, that is very important to us in some countries where regulations have been evolving from a situation where you had a permit to pollute to a situation where you will look at the impact on biodiversity of our activities. This is the case, for example, in Marseille, where we have been there during the UNCN meeting. We are managing the wastewater facilities there, and definitely the improvement in the wastewater treatment has been improving biodiversity in the region. So for us, it's very important to have a framework in which to guide our actions. Frankly speaking, we could really experience the strength and the power of having a clear reference framework. That was the case for taxonomy, for example. We are the first European company to publish our turnover 1 year in advance, according to the taxonomy regulation. The same for climate change mitigation actions. We had our 1.5 degree Celsius plan approved by the SBTi standard. And for us, I mean, having a label on the ocean is something very important, because it's not only to guide our actions, but also to engage with our partners, being either clients or others that will contribute to the same goals. So what we did is that we adopted the parameters or the KPI that are relevant to our activities. I think that out of the 44, a third of them is part of our day-to-day operations, so it's easy for us to track them. 1/3 is not relevant, and for example, we are not in food production, so we are not monitoring those kind of activities. And then there are others that we were not monitoring, that we are starting to monitor, because they have been identified as important one in the label. So this is something we are putting in place as part of our operational framework to make sure that we deliver what we say. And of course, we are incorporating those parameters in our ESG reporting. So very supportive of the initiative, and once again, for us, it's critical to have this strong framework to be able not only to act but to engage with other partners. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Camus, and thank you for your time to share with us, I mean, the commitment of Suez on oceans. Let me give now the floor to the permanent representative of Portugal to the United Nations in New York, His Excellency, Mr. Francisco Lopes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Richard. Let me start, first of all, by congratulating the government of France for organizing the One Ocean Summit in Brest in February next year. And I also thank the organizers of this very, very informative event today. Merci bien. As you know, in June next year in Lisbon, Portugal and Kenya will co-host the second UN Ocean Conference, whose theme is Scaling Up Ocean Action Based on Science and Innovation for the implementation of Goal 14. Events such as the One Ocean Summit in February are key to ensure that we build momentum towards a transformative UN Ocean Conference. There are two aspects that will be at the core of the UN Ocean Conference that I would like to briefly highlight today, precisely because of their connection with the theme of this event, the Ocean Approved label. The first one is partnership or partnerships. Portugal and Kenya are invested in making sure that the UN Ocean Conference will be inclusive and to ensure that we bring together all relevant stakeholders. Governments alone cannot address the challenges, the mounting challenges we are facing. And governments alone cannot bring about the transformation we really need. We should be able to forge a wide-ranging partnership where different stakeholders work together according to their different strengths and common goal. So we need academia, we need private companies, we need the scientific community, the researchers, the foundations, the NGOs. We need citizens in general working together to achieve the necessary paradigm shift. I therefore commend the work carried out by La Fondation de la Mer, and I stress that these kinds of partnerships are really essential in order to attain tangible progress to address the ocean challenges. The second aspect has to do with solutions. Since the first day, Portugal and Kenya have been stressing that the UN Ocean Conference cannot be transformative if all it does is restating commitments made earlier and recalling the challenges still waiting to be addressed. We need to move from commitments to innovative solutions that really support the implementation of those commitments and really move the needle in terms of ocean protection and ocean sustainability. So concrete projects and solutions, such as the Ocean Approved label, can help make the difference. I really appreciated what I learned today, and I look forward to hearing more in the future about the implementation of this Ocean Approved label and its potential application in other contexts. And we hope these and other ideas can be featured at the UN Ocean Conference and also at the Sustainable Economy and Investment Forum, a forum which is one of the main side events we're organizing and that will take place on the UN conference in Monsieur Richard, Merci bien.
Merci beaucoup, Ambassador. And I would like to say again how France is happy to work with Portugal and Kenya on the oceans next year. Let me give the floor now to the representative of the mission of Kenya, Lily Mwanjila. Karibu, Lily.
Thank you, Olivia, and good morning, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. Apologies from Ambassador Njambi, who had to step out to another meeting, but I will give some remarks on her behalf. So once again, good morning, delegates and everyone. I want to thank the French mission and the Fondation de la Mer for hosting this event to further generate momentum on ocean action. We're encouraged by the speakers' insightful presentations on the tools that can contribute to the implementation of Sustainable Development Goal 14 and its linkages to other SDGs. Ladies and gentlemen, the COVID-19 pandemic has had severe effects worldwide and in virtually every sector, undermining years of development efforts. Already vulnerable coastal communities in Africa and the small island developing states have suffered significant revenue losses across coastal and marine tourism, fisheries and aquaculture, and the shipping industry. These impacts flow beyond the ocean-based sectors to land-based economies, having economic and social repercussions across the entire economy. With these socio-economic disruptions, the scientific research field has also been affected, particularly the collection of data and information that contributes to the formulation of government policies and development of the blue economy and related activities. Multi-stakeholder partnerships that mobilize and share scientific knowledge, expertise, technology, and investments, as well as leveraging on local, regional, and global institutions and indigenous knowledge are key to inspiring communities, businesses, and governments across the world to change the way the land and the ocean are exploited. Excellencies, Kenya has long prioritized the sustainable utilization of its ocean and blue economy resources as an enabler of the Kenya Vision 2030. We recognize that the ocean economy is a smart investment that can deliver social, economic, and environmental benefits to our people. The successful outcome of the Nairobi 2018 Sustainable Blue Economy Conference affirmed the immense potential of SDG 14. In the pursuit of enhanced development and productivity, we must steadfastly protect the ocean and marine resources. We are implementing various policies aimed at tackling ocean-based challenges. These include enhancing institutional governance structures, community mobilization, enhancing maritime transport and security, and capacity building through our maritime institutions. We will also continue to leverage on global institutions and private sector partnerships to sharpen ocean conservation efforts. Looking forward as co-host of the second UN Ocean Conference with Portugal that is taking place in Lisbon from 27th June to 1st July 2020. We invite innovators, investors, scientists, government representatives, and the like to forge meaningful partnerships and transformative commitments to action and invest in the blue economy for the achievement of SDG 14. Excellencies, the reality is that SDG 14 cannot be achieved in isolation. It requires deliberate international coordination and collaboration with investment programs of other related SDGs and their targets, including food security and nutrition, climate action, biodiversity, to name a few. With the right tools, such as the Ocean Approved Label, funding, raising awareness, incentives, capacity building, and report card-based monitoring, we can effectively contribute to the sustainable management and use of our ocean resources. As I conclude, perhaps it will be good to have the translation of these toolkits by the Foundation, which will lead to greater outreach and inclusivity. We are looking forward to the One Ocean Summit in February and to other various forums that will be a lead up to the Ocean Conference in 2022. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Kenya again. This is now time for our interactive discussions with participants. Some NGOs registered even before the event, so I will start with them. Please keep it short, 2 minutes each to give time to the panelists to reply to you. So I would like to start with Isabelle Mananga-Ossé of the NGO Label Beauté Noire, if she's online. Isabelle Mananga-Ossé, are you online? No. So maybe Christelle Carfenton of Oceanopolis Acts. Yeah, Christelle Carfenton, I see you on my screen, but you're on mute. Christelle Carfenton? No. So I will try with Arnaud de Chanterac, MN Conseil. No. Patrice Remer, Positive Actions. Not as well. And Benoît Montet, Dam Tower. I've seen Benoît Montet in the chat room, so he's probably online.
They all say they don't know how to unmute.
Good afternoon, good morning all. Benoît Montet speaking. Thank you very much for hosting this webinar, very interesting. And thank you very much also for the participation of the very big company like Suez in this conference. It's also showing the key position of the ocean among the companies. So I am an international expert in labelization and label, especially oriented into HR and management label, part of also the normalization in HR through ISO. And first, I would like to congratulate the Fondation de la Mer for having launched this fantastic and unique label linked to the sea. My first two questions are, does the approach and the process to be Fondation de la Mer or ocean approved, to be ocean approved, are the process required a lot of work from the company? And then is the label mainly reserved for large organizations?
Thank you. Maybe I will take a second question before giving the floor to the panelists. I see Elvire Moreau wanted to ask a question. Elvire Moreau, we can't hear you. Okay. Maybe the panelists can reply to the question of Mr. Benoît Montet first. I don't know if Sabine or Philippe want to reply.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Mr. Montet, for your comments. I think the answer to your two questions is as follows. In terms of work, we would say the experience we have with companies is that it does not require a tremendous amount of work. First and foremost, it's very clear that what we're trying to do is to have impact. And in order to have impact, we need to be very clear about the scope of activity that we are labeling. For a multinational company operating many divisions in many countries, this would be a tremendous amount of work. Very often what happens is that a business unit, a region, a big country are in scope. So that narrows the scope of work. And then it can be scaled up, obviously, to an entire organization. But then, once you have defined the scope, usually a lot of the data that we have put in terms of the key performance indicators as part of the ocean framework are existing. So it doesn't take too much time to assemble them. The audit process is very scheduled and very, very, very strict. I would say it's maybe a small team for a couple of months going through the assembly of the data, the process, etc. But it's not too tasking in terms of resources. And at least it has not been mentioned by any of the companies that have adopted the framework or in the process of labeling. as being a major hurdle. I mean, you need to dedicate resources. And of course, if you have no data whatsoever, then you need to go and gather it. But in many companies that exists, or it's fairly feasible. Which links to the second comment. We have companies of all sizes that go through the labeling process and that have adopted the framework, from a small fishing company to a very large company, like Monsieur Camus highlighted with Suez. So really it covers the whole spectrum. And that's one of the aims of the Fondation La Mer, to make something that is very relevant to all company sizes. And so that, you know, the impact can be massive and not only for big companies.
Thank you very much, Philippe. Maybe I will read the question of Elvire Moreau. She wanted to know if Ocean Approved targets only one product, or can target a whole company, or depending on the case, a whole company or only one product of a company.
So it's never about one product. I think it would be defeating the purpose. It has to be scaled at the right level. That's exactly what I was trying to say before, which is very often it's a region, it's a business unit that has a scope of products, a scope of activities. Often, you know, depending on the sector, it can involve manufacturing plant, distribution centers, you know, the whole value chain. But it's never for one product only, unless the company was one product only company. In that case, of course, the two are assembled. Let me use this opportunity to add one more thing. And I think Monsieur Camus alluded to that. Some of the comments I read about some of the other companies when I was describing the process. It is extremely important that this process be owned by one company, and that the scope is well defined, and that the baselining and the activity is well defined. If we do that, it's fantastic. It's better if that company embraces suppliers upstream, distribution downstream. Monsieur Camus has talked about that in the past. You know, he wants to have a label and a framework to be able to engage with partners. We also heard that from CMA CGM. We heard about harbors. We heard that from Talgo about the suppliers. So defining a scope, having a company owning it is very important, but then branching out upstream and downstream for us has the biggest impact.
Thank you very much, Philippe. I think that Mr. Ben Monte had a second question.
Yes, thank you very much again for this opportunity. Yes, I have a more business-oriented question, if I may, and two business questions. One for Suez, maybe, and the other more generic. The first is, what kind of support and benefits in terms of communication does the label Ocean Approved provide? And the second question for Suez especially, what is the main reason why Suez have decided to invest in the Ocean Approved certification or label?
Why don't we let Mr. Camus answer first?
Yes, I think that, thanks for the question. I think communication is more an output than, I would say, a goal by itself. I think that being the oceans and SDG 14, but we could say that on the other SDGs. We could also say that on carbon emission and so on. I think that more and more our clients are asking us, how do you contribute, or how can you help me achieve my own goals? And therefore, for us, it's critical, and it's also a factor of differentiation to not only do well our job, I mean, treat well water, eliminate well waste, but it's also being able to very simply, quickly show how are we contributing to their own goals. And therefore, you need to put your house in order, is to select the topics on which you have an impact and make sure that the value proposition you have for your clients, the way you operate your company, and the way you report are totally aligned. So that's it's a business goal before anything, especially in an environmental business as the one of Suez. And the second thing is that you have now the same question from the Planet Finance, who is you can attract investors, you can attract lenders if you are very also clear about your contribution to those various topics. And for us, it's therefore it's a really business purpose. So a lot had been done in the other topics, and as was said by Sabine at the very beginning, I mean, ocean, there was a lot of willingness to do something, but no framework, and this is what this framework brings. It's having a common language to share with our clients and partners.
Philippe Guy, maybe you wanted to say something as well on this?
I'm not sure. I mean, Monsieur Montet, I think the response from Monsieur Camus was better than anything I could have said in terms of. I think let me add one thing though, because I think what Monsieur Camus said is very important. It is not about communication. The whole thing is not about reporting. Reporting is great. The label is a way to show that a company has gone through the process. But the purpose of the whole thing is to have a change in the trajectory and to have an impact. And that impact, as Monsieur Camus said, can be completely part of the core business. It's not a nice to have on the side. It's part of the core business. In the business of Suez, it's obvious that it has to be part of it, but for many other companies, in just simply attracting investors and financial loans and everything, it's part of the core business. The opportunity also to find new operational margin, new services to offer. As Monsieur Camus said, if you want to be able to offer new services to your clients and help them change their own practices, you start with yourself. So it's a business opportunity for companies, not only a reporting and communication opportunity.
And not to speak about people and attracting talents, as Mr. Montet is in HR topics, it's also very important internally to mobilize forces.
Yeah, I was going to add something on that. In the same spirit, if you transform your business and at the same time you can demonstrate you have a positive impact on the ocean, you have a more profitable business, you have a business that attracts more sustainable clients, and also you attract the talents of tomorrow that care a lot about how their employer deals with climate and biodiversity issues. And the ocean gathers all these items that people care about and that we all care about, i.e. climate, biodiversity, and circular economy. And with the tools we have developed, we actually address all these three issues with talking and addressing the ocean health. So we have a long-term goal that we address, and then we have a specific goal for every company that we help achieve.
Thank you, Sabine. I have another question for the CEO of Suez. I think it's quite connected with what has been said, but I have a question about the difficulty to mobilize internal resources to gather data. Is it a challenge to reply to the Fondation, La Fondation de la Mer expectations?
It's for us, what we really want to make sure is that those, whatever information is requested has an operational meaning. I think the worst is to report on KPI that are useless except for producing the report, because you know that then the quality of the data is not there, and then it's abandoned, it's even sometimes forced into the systems. So this is why, for example, we say that 1/3 of the criteria do not apply to us because it's not part of our business, it's not part of our operational processes, and we prefer not to follow those or invent numbers to meet those criteria. So we are really focusing on KPIs and parameters that are clearly part of our business, and we are also adding the one that we did not identify but that we find totally relevant, and therefore we are adapting our processes and the way we operate to be able to produce this information with an operational meaning, which is the best way to ensure its reliability and its sustainability in the long term.
if I may add one point to that, I think this is extremely important what Mr. Camus said, which is the flexibility of the ocean framework, the ocean label, which is out of the range of 44 indicators. I mean, this is the amount we have today. Some of them are very relevant for a business like Suez, and others are more relevant for a company in food packaging, in cosmetics, in energy production, or everything. So that's a flexibility that we believe, is key. And again, and Mr. Camus, I think you've given feedback, and please continue to do so. The indicators, we're trying to make them as operational as possible or as linked to operations as possible. Can't succeed all the time, but that's the aim, to be very, very pragmatic.
Thank you, Philippe. I would like to give the floor now to Anne-Louise Manson of the Swedish mission to the UN in New York.
Thank you so much, and great to be listening to you today. And thank you so much to the French mission and the Fondation de la Mer. It's been very, very interesting to listen to this initiative and showing a great leadership in a very important issue. I'm really impressed with how the showcase of how we can, in practical way, protect our ocean. I think that an issue which Sweden, of course, is very engaged in, and having been the first, one of the hosts, together with the other member states in the first ocean conference a couple of years ago. And from the Swedish side, we're also working very hard for, and it's very timely, what regards to try to introduce a legal binding agreement to combat plastic pollution, which is, of course, very interlinked with what this labeling issue will get into. In this context also, it fits on also to speak about a little bit of next year's conference in Stockholm, Stockholm Plus 50. It's a UN international meeting which will be held in Stockholm the 2nd and the 3rd of June next year. And it will be pertaining of a healthy planet and prosperity for all. And also there will be a holistic approach where green and blue economy which are very interlinked, will be an important part. So I think this discussion fits in very well in that meeting as well. I also have a question to the panelists regarding this labeling, and that regards how could we, in a good manner, follow up those labeling so that we can ensure that companies are using this in a responsible way. We know that there is a lot of greenwashing today. We want to labeling the products and services in a favorable way. So my question is, how will we follow up and be also a watchdog that we're not labeling not something that is not really promoting reaching the SDG 14 in a good way. Thank you so much again for this interesting discussion.
Sabine, do you want to answer? Do you want me to answer?
Yeah, I'll say a few words and then you could add. Well, thank you very much for Sweden. I see there's another question from Lars Wedding from the Royal Swedish Society of Naval Science. The label is structured in two phases. Companies that get the first level of label are companies that have already engaged into the process of identifying their impact on the ocean and acting to reduce it. And that's the first stage of labelization. And frankly, very, very few companies are already capable of doing that. And what we want to do is recognize those companies, those pioneer companies that engage into that process. The label is attributed for a 3-year period. And during the course of that 3-year period, companies have to achieve a number of steps and goals. And obviously, if they don't achieve these goals, they can, the label can be removed from them. And I think it would be quite harmful for a company to have the label removed because they haven't achieved their objectives, or they have acted wrongfully towards the ocean. So yes, there may be some risks, but we are in a process where we will follow up on what companies are actually doing, and we will be in a position with the labelization committee to remove the label for companies that miss acts. I think that was, if you want to add something, do you want to add something, Philippe?
No, just a small point, because I mean, this is fitting in between, you know, during these 3 years at 18 months, there is an interim audit by the independent auditor. So it's not something that the Fondation de la Mer does, because we want to make sure that the process has a lot of integrity. So this is an independent auditor that, supplies the dossier in the first place, follows up at 18 months and gives input to the Comité de Labellisation. So we are trying everything to do to avoid greenwashing. This is in nobody's interest, certainly not in the interest of Fondation de la Mer to start with. We want this label to stand for integrity and impact at the end of the day.
Thank you, Sabine and Philippe. I give the floor to Lars Swedin from the Royal Swedish Society of Naval Sciences.
Thank you so very much. Can I add, I'm also from the Académie de Marine in France. Congratulations to Fondation de la Mer for that initiative. I will go back to more as a basic question. Sweden is, of course, a geographically a maritime country, but it's very little understood. If you read newspapers and so on, transport is aircraft and lorries and maybe train. Ships are very seldom mentioned. The carbon question is linked to forests, not too much to the sea. What I try to say is that this question must come outside the rather narrow, if you excuse me, circle of environmental specialists, because I think, at least again in Sweden, it's very difficult to get out the idea that the sea is important. So how do we do that? How do we get out to the general public an understanding that the sea is important?
I'm not sure I fully understand your question, Lars. I'm sorry.
So my question is, yes, this is very good, all this initiative, but you must get the general public understanding the importance of the sea. And at least in Sweden, that does not happen. So what do we do?
Okay, sorry. Yes, of course. The program we're presenting today, the Ocean Framework and the label Ocean Approved are dedicated for companies. So they are a set of tools aimed at businesses and finance. With Fondation de la Mer and other NGOs and foundations around the world, we are working to talk to the general public and to talk to the young generations. This is clearly a major objective, and when you see that how few companies take the ocean into account when they look at their environmental impact, you can realize that the general public doesn't even have that awareness either. So I fully agree with you. There's a lot of work to be done. COP26 has, and since COP21, the ocean has become part of the conversations, the high-level conversations that the nations have, and this has gone through the newspapers, and people are starting to understand why they should be focused on the ocean if they are interested in climate and biodiversity. But this is not enough, and we need to continue working in that area. I fully agree, but it takes a lot of people and a lot of effort.
Thank you, Sabine. Let me maybe read some questions by Valentini Iturriague on the chat room. in terms of impact, would you agree on the fact that when a company is labelized, it mainly engages itself on promises and actions which will be put in place during several years? By that, the company is not proving at the moment when it's labelized that it has no impact on the ocean. And the second question is to know which companies are already ocean approved today and in which industries.
Let me address the first point. I think this is maybe a misunderstanding. The whole point of the label is actually to have a funnel of commitment and resources by companies so that, you know, obviously when you have done the baselining with the ocean framework, you have gone through the process with, you know, the intervention of an independent auditor like Bureau Veritas. You put in place action plans, you put in place commitments, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't mean that Monsieur Camus, I'm sure, can testify to that you know, in 24 hours, you have transformed your operations. Nobody expects that from a company on any topic. But saying that, you know, once the companies have been labelized, it's essentially a plan and nothing happens, I think would be a misunderstanding of both the intent as well as the practicality. I think Monsieur Camus was very vocal in saying it has to serve business purposes and it has to be a differentiator versus other companies. I don't think he would say that if it was only a plan on paper and nothing was done. So it is about commitment. Yes, it is a plan. Yes, it is not yet a result. But as Sabine said herself, we have different labels and some of them are already geared towards results. Some of them are geared towards committing resources and an action plan. We want to recognize both, and no company can be transformed in 24 hours. But again, the label is a 3 years process. There is a starting base and an ending base with actions and a change in trajectory in between. Monsieur Camus, maybe you want to add something?
No, I think you rightfully said that, I mean, you cannot embark into this kind of approach if you are not committed to really align what you are going to report with the way you are going to restructure your business, the way you are going to relate with all your stakeholders, being the clients, being your investors or your people. So I think that if you do it seriously. I cannot add more than that. Huh?
Could you just give some examples of industries already labelized?
So Sabine, I think it's important to say that, you know, we wanted to share where we are today. The label was introduced in June 2021. There are a series of companies that are embarking in the process right now, but we are not completed the first cycle of label. So, you know, we again thank the French mission at the United Nations to give us the opportunity to share. This is a baby that is growing very fast. Everything is in there, but we're not yet at the first thing. So there are companies from multiple sectors, and I will let Sabine answer that point. But then the other companies are still in the process.
Yes, we have a number of companies in different sectors, some very small, some pretty big. For example, in engineering, in cosmetics, in the maritime industry. So these companies are currently being audited by BV, Bureau Veritas, on their local operations and worldwide operations. The first labelized companies should be announced in early 2022, maybe at the time of the One Ocean Summit. That's what we hope for. I should say that we've been very much supported by the French Ministry of the Seas that have been looking at with much interest into all these products, because obviously they are the first concerned by the ocean and by the way corporations are tackling these major issues. So we have very strong support from our country, which may sound obvious as France has the second maritime space among the countries on the planet. But this is important to remind everyone that the Fondation La Mer is heavily supported by the ministry and also by the Foreign Affairs, hence this presentation today with a permanent mission. So this is a process. We are proud to embark many countries in this process, and we're very hopeful of its impact.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, as Sabine said, there are multiple companies in multiple sectors. I mean, we have people in the data centers, electronic data centers being part of the Ocean Framework Reference, considering this with people. I mean, the whole point is that this is not only for the maritime industry. This is really cross sectors, both the design of it as well as the companies that are in it. And the second point I would like to make is that, the reason why we're having this conversation today, again, thanks to the French mission at the UN, is the first wave of labeling companies will be pushed and is being pushed, supported by the Fondation La Mer. This will continue forever. But we hope that the conversation we have with foundations and NGOs in other countries will enable other organizations to push this process and this product, and that all together, we can create an alliance of multiple foundations in multiple countries that have the same process, the same rigor. And hopefully by the end of 2022, it's not going to be driven only by the Fondation La Mer, but by multiple foundations together, again, representing multiple countries, and we'll have a much more international, set of companies that can go through this.
Thank you, Philippe. Before wrapping up and the closing remarks, I would like just to ask last questions on the chat room. Could you give some example of actions which companies shall carry out in the 3 years after labeling?
Well, it really depends on the sector the companies act in. We have the framework itself has 44 indicators. Philippe Guy showed the framework and its different captions and categories. So for every sector, the impacts will be different. And obviously the leverage points to reduce the impact on the ocean will be different. For some of them, it would be packaging. For some others, it will be fishing. For others, it will be artificially building on coastlines. So we can give a one and single answer to that question. And this is part of the work we are doing and consultants are doing with the companies. It's identifying the relevant indicators for each specific company and engaging these companies in measuring these impacts and reducing them.
Yeah, totally agree. I think this is exactly the beauty of it. It's multi-sector, and therefore the impact is multi-sector. Mr. Camus mentioned himself that out of the 44 indicators, only a subset of them were relevant for Suez. For others, it's very different. And again, the ability to engage suppliers and downstream distributors depends on the companies as well. It also depends on the power of the companies. Some small companies can only influence their own scope of activity, and maybe some suppliers, but have difficulty in influencing what happens downstream in the distribution chain. For instance, in consumer goods and food, for instance, it's very difficult because some supermarket chains are very, very powerful. So they're upstream and their scope. So it depends on the activity, but everything that we've seen so far, and Mr. Camus testified to that, is about very, very, very concrete actions. It's about impact at the end of the day.
Thanks to the panelists. I'm very glad that we had so many questions. And I would like to give the floor to Mr. Julien Barbière, head of the Ocean section at UNESCO, for the closing remarks.
Good morning, Olivier. It's actually Elliot Minchenberg. I'm the director of the UNESCO office in New York. My colleague Julien could not join this morning. But I'm very pleased to be with you and to attend this extremely interesting discussion this morning. So first, let me thank you, Olivier, and the Permanent Mission of France to the UN for the invitation, and the Fondation La Mer as well, of course, for your commitment. From UNESCO's perspective, as the UN agency responsible for the coordination of the Decade for Ocean Science, and also the organization which hosts the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, we are of course pleased to see that the international community is gradually mobilizing to conserve and sustainably use the oceans, the seas, and the marine resources. And actually the importance of mobilizing the general public was also stressed by some of the panelists this morning. And in that regard, I want to emphasize the critical role of education. UNESCO has been actively engaged on this topic, engaging with governments as well, to ensure that education to the planet is fully integrated in the curricula. The UN Ocean Decade actually provides a convening framework for all actors, regardless of sector, geography, generational disciplines to co-design and co-deliver together the science we need for the ocean we want, actually. The good news is that we're not starting from zero. The UN Ocean Decade has been building upon decades of research and exploration of the ocean. And since the start of its implementation in January this year, 31 global programs, over 80 projects, and dozens of contributions of in-kind and financial resources have been endorsed as being part of the collective Ocean Decade efforts. But as we've discussed this morning, the private sector has a lead role to play and can make significant contribution to ensure the equitable and sustainable development of the ocean economy. And in this regard, I welcome the insightful intervention from the panelists and Mr. Camus and other panelists this morning. We need the private sector to act, as we said, as the ocean steward, but also as a driver for technological innovation, as an employer of the next generation of ocean science professionals, as a leader for innovative public-private partnership, and also as a science-based knowledge generator and users. Hence, we very much welcome the need to deploy science-based tools developed for and in partnership with ocean industries that can drive towards more sustainable and effective operation in the marine environment and reduce environmental and social risks. Let me conclude by saying that UNESCO has made a call for actions for the next 10 years. This call is focusing on initiatives that address the ocean climate nexus, marine pollution, and ecosystem resilience. These decade actions are working across the world and convene hundreds of partners from the science community, government, philanthropy, private sector, and NGOs, including many from small island developing states and least developed countries, where the climate question, as we all know, is of crucial importance. The time to act is now. Many of you have said it. And I invite you to join the newly launched Ocean Decade Global Stakeholder Forum to exchange, catalyze, synergize, and ultimately co-design and co-deliver together and transformative initiatives for our ocean. As we move into 2022, the ocean will be high on the international agenda. We know that there will be the Ocean Summit organized by France, of course, the All Oceans Conference in Palau, the 4th BBNJ Intergovernmental Conference in March, and finally the UN Ocean Conference in Lisbon at the end of June. We therefore have a unique opportunity to deliver the critical knowledge gaps that are hindering our global oceans ambitions. With these words, I thank you all, and thank you, the organizer, for holding this event. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Elliot. Thank you very much for making it possible to join us this morning and to remind us the very important role played by UNESCO in the field of oceans. This is time to leave, I guess. Please do not hesitate to contact the French mission to the UN in New York through our website if you need any complementary information or if you need to be put in touch with some of the panelists. Merci beaucoup. Au revoir.